Hi, welcome. Hi,
Hi.
Lauren.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you are here.
Me
Um,
too.
this is like I feel like our friendship has taken some like interesting, longer, weird turns through all of this. So it's
Yeah,
so great to have you in this capacity and also just
thanks.
like in this moment.
Thanks. No, same. I feel like maybe that's just like getting older.
Yeah.
You're just like, wow, like you have these friends from different parts of your life and lives just change
Yeah.
like so much,
Yes.
So if you've known someone for a decade, like you've probably known them through a couple of different lifetimes.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like it has to have been a decade at this point, or almost, right?
Yeah, because I'm trying to think when I was like in New York and in class.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2013
Yep.
maybe, 20 so coming up,
Yep. Oh
2013,
boy.
2014. Oh. And we auditioned for grad school together.
We did. That was a
Yeah,
thing.
that
That
was
was
a
totally a
thing.
thing. Gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
like lifetimes.
Mhm.
Well, tell the listener who you are today. Hi.
Hi, I'm Lauren Noll. I'm gosh, this is what we're here to talk about.
This is what we're here to talk about.
What is my identity? I'm an actor, and that's what I have done most of my life in various mediums. But now I am also a filmmaker, which includes producing, writing, and directing in terms of sort of overall creating my own content.
Which is literally why you're here because we were talking about this before we even pressed record, but it's just so, I feel like I've been such a cheerleader from afar watching all of your stuff and the amount of
Oh.
projects that you are churning out and the ways in which you are showing up and creating. And it's for me, I'm super pumped for you and just like cheerleading on the side. But that's, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the inner workings of it all is a totally different experience, which is what I imagine we'll chat about. But,
Totally.
you've been doing so much. And I guess obviously you have lived a life prior to, putting on the filmmaker multi-hatted human self. But I
Mhm.
guess in your shortened version, like what brought you to be doing that now?
I geez, I wish I had like a really super clear answer for that. I mean,
Mhm.
I just feel like it was just kind of the ride that my life took. But I when I met you, we were both really focused on musical theater. I sing too, and it's not something I do a lot of anymore, though I miss it,
Mhm.
and I'm sure I'll do a musical again at some point in my life. But that was sort of my initial pursuit in terms of after I left like a smaller market and moving to a bigger city and graduating from college with my BFA. I went to New York and pursued musical theater. Um, and film acting, I think I started taking like um, Heidi Marshall's screen acting
Mhm.
class while I was there because my agent at the time recommended me when I mentioned to her that I was interested in being represented for like TV and film as well. And so I sort of like had that planted. The most I'd really ever done was maybe like a student film when I was in
Yeah.
college, but it was very super theater focused. Which, to be honest, I think that's because formal acting training is so theater focused. And
Mhm.
so, after spending a few years in New York and feeling like, I don't know, like kind of like I was hitting a wall, though if I look back, I'm not sure that I was.
Mhm.
But I just thought, okay, you know what? I've had this kind of goal to go get my MFA for some time. I thought about it, you know, earlier after graduating from undergrad, and it just sort of re-entered my mind when I was in New York, and it just felt like something that I wanted to do to sort of like refocus because I'd sort of like let the survival lifestyle of that New York hustle just like sort of wear on me, and
Yeah.
I was just looking for a reset and a place to like immerse.
Yeah.
And so for me, I chose a very expensive master's program. I don't think you have to do that to
Yes.
have the experience that I did. While I love it and I'm grateful for my training, that was just what I did at that time. And so I went through some life changes during that time. I had a very major relationship in my life end during that time. And it was just sort of this moment of rebirth anyway. And so I sort of surprised myself by coming to LA rather than going back to New York after I graduated from that program.
Yeah.
And then in doing so, that is like immediately sort of a switch in focus from stage to screen, though there is some theater in LA and I have done some theater in LA. You know, it's more of a film
For sure.
industry here. So in doing so, I just started, auditioning. I managed to find some representation out of my showcase. And, they started submitting me and I was auditioning and I was like feeling pretty proud of my auditions, but also it was just hitting that wall then of like, oh, I've spent my whole career up to this point building a resume for theater and I don't really have a resume for film and TV.
Right.
And even where I was getting great feedback on my work, it was just kind of like they were like, but we went with somebody who, had some films under her belt or had some current TV credits, whatnot, blah, blah, blah. So it became clear to me, and everybody said this, they're like, well, you've got to create your own work. You've got to make your own stuff. And I was like, I went to school for acting for like however many years, 2 degrees later. I didn't go to film school. And, having been someone who had 2 degrees, I'm very like, that's my way into something. It's like a class and a test and a this. And now I know it. And so just to like learn this whole other, multiple skill sets actually.
Yeah.
I was feeling like super overwhelmed by it. For the longest time I didn't. I was like, well, I'm not a writer, I'm an actor. I'm not a director, I'm an actor. I'm not a blah blah blah, I'm an actor. So I don't know what to do. And then finally one day I was like, stop. Just stop doing
What
that.
was that moment? Like, what made you have the stop moment? Was there a particular moment? I don't know.
It was probably another audition or something like that I felt like super great and felt like I'd gotten some good feedback and maybe had moved like a little bit in a certain direction with it. And then it ultimately came down again to like, gotta have the credits, need the footage, need the this and that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to make something. And so initially that became that started as sort of a vehicle, I guess, for myself to just have some materials, you know what I mean, that I thought might help me as an actor. And then I sort of it took over. Like, because at the end of the day, like I saw this film at Dances with Films recently, and it was it was about this writer who was sort of on this sort of pursuit and like this one hit writer, and he had taken this retreat to try and write something else that mattered. And there was this idea that was like, okay, what do you want to be like? What's your real goal? Is it to be seen as a writer? Is it to be like giving the appearance of being a writer, or do you have something to say? Right. And so I think that was what ultimately happened, because the first thing that I wrote was just bigger than me. It was bigger than myself as an actor. It was bigger than, I did play the lead role in it. And, that was sort of my initial motivation, to be honest, was just to give myself something to do, something to work on as an actor. But the story just became like, it turned out there was something to say. Yeah. And I think that is super important. And then when that happens, other things fall into place. And sometimes you're not the right person for a certain role or for whatever. And then you can like reach out to your community and fill it in the way that best serves the story, which is then in turn the best thing that serves like the audience that will receive it and how it will impact their lives.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that first piece? Because it is awesome.
Oh, thanks. So it's called Honor, and it's a 15-minute short film. And I wrote the script primarily in a writing class. So that's what I did. Again, me, school type. You don't have to be that way, but I signed up for a class. When I decided I wanted to make something, I was like, well, let me get in a writing class. And
was it a screenwriting class or just like a general writing?
A screenwriting class, yeah.
Cool.
So my teacher, Olivia Quartero Briggs, was instrumental in sort of, I don't know. It's just like if somebody is like, tomorrow, come back with 3 pages and it needs to, this is the exercise. Like we're working. Do you remember when you like, I mean, I don't know if all of the audience of this podcast will have this experience, but like if you're in an intro acting class and you start doing these like little scenes, and every time they're like introducing a new thing, like this one is room conflict. So now you already have to have, your objective and your tactics, and that's already built in. But now we want to work with like something that's going on in the environment that would potentially be an obstacle for you.
Mhm.
It was things like that. It was like kind of you do that in learning screenwriting too. It's like building in conflict. And so we would have these like little assignments, and I learned about the structure of a screenplay. And I do think whether you take a class or not, or like learn from, say, picking up a book or just talking to a friend of yours who studied screenwriting, it is good to know the rules so that you can choose to break them.
Correct.
Like it'll just set you up for more success if you understand that like a story needs conflict. You know what I mean? A protagonist needs a flaw, things like that. So I signed up for a class, and I ultimately,
Did you
I
have
didn't
this
even,
idea going into it?
no. So that's the thing. I knew
Okay.
I wanted to write a film that I was going to make. And then at this point, gosh, it was before COVID. So this would have been, because we shot this in 2019, in December of 2019. Thank God
Wow.
we shot it in December of 2019. But so in April of that year, my alma mater, my undergrad alma mater, which is BYU, Brigham Young University, which is a Mormon church owned university. There were students there that started protesting the honor code office on campus. And I was seeing this story, and I was like, I was so blown away, because when I had been at BYU, it was just it was not like a protest culture school. People were, it just felt very much like, people go there to be obedient. And I mean, of course, you have some along the way who don't, but like primarily people don't question things, don't, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great school. There's a lot of educational value to be gained there, but because it's owned and operated by the LDS Church, these sort of moral codes of conduct are put on that are maybe like stricter than at the University of Utah or some other
Right.
state school. It's not just about plagiarism, but it's about like your curfew, like how long you can hang out with people of the opposite sex before you have to go back to your own places, like when they're allowed to be in your apartment, like definitely no sex before marriage, definitely no drinking, no any of that. And so, and I think if you come into BYU, you kind of know like that's the environment and that's the culture. But what these students were really protesting was actually the enforcement methods of the honor code, not necessarily, the code itself. And I was just blown away, because I was like, wow, look at these students go. They're like standing up for themselves. And I started to reflect on my own experience, because I went to BYU as sort of a very devoted member of the LDS Church. And while I was there is when I had sort of my own discovery process about like my sexuality and the fact that I was interested in women. And I had my first girlfriend in like my final year there. And so I lived in fear of this thing all the time. It was the thing that could strip my degree away from me after being there for 4 years. And it was all like, if anyone found out about me and my girlfriend, like I could be turned in and then kicked out of school without credits that were really super transferable to other universities. And this happened to some people that I know. And so I was watching these students protest this, and I was like, oh my gosh, like when they tell you like pick that one story, the thing that like only you can tell, that so well, I was like, that's it. I have to tell this story about
You
being
had that
a-
moment of this was it in that class, or was that
yeah.
percolating and then the teacher, Olivia, right? Olivia's her name,
Mhm.
was like, pick the thing that only you can do and you're like, that's it. What was the moment?
No, I think I was searching for, well, what story do I want to tell? What should I write about? I mean, I feel like I knew that it was going to have like a queer lens on it because
Yeah.
that's just my lens. But then so it had been sort of percolating in my mind, like what should I write? Because I knew at the end of this class, our final sort of project was supposed to be a completed short script,
Okay.
like a 10-page script. So then I saw the story about this protest happening at BYU, and I was like, oh, there we go. Like that connects, like I can dig into that and talk about what it's like to sort of live in fear of that as like a queer student at BYU, particularly a queer female student at BYU, and also in it there are layers of like the identity crisis that is that moment if you've had this one belief system but then you learn something else about yourself.
Yeah.
And then just took the sort of interview slash interrogation that would happen in the honor code office, and I talked to a lot of my friends that had been through that process about like what the experience was like for them so that I could keep that as authentic as possible. And then we just sort of use that scene to talk about what that experience might be like.
Wow. So you wrote this in that class. You came out with a 10-page short.
Mhm.
How much changed before you, and or how much time between the time you finished that to either developing it more or like we're
Yeah,
doing this?
I can't remember exactly, but I think it was like, gosh, because I was doing this play. Speaking of theater, I was doing this play that year in like April, and it was after that point. So it was like maybe May or June that I had sort of like finished a draft that we were done with this class.
Mhm.
And at that point, because I already went into it with the intention of like, we're going to make this.
Okay.
And then during the play that I was in, I met my friend Lily Richards and her partner Caitlin Coombe, and I sort of wrote one of the characters in the script for Lily, and then Caitlin, they both went to Emerson, and Caitlin went for producing, and she had produced
Okay.
the web series that Lily and she made together, and she agreed to come on as a producer. And so then I started finding my people, you know what I mean? And
Well, that was
so
my next question. Like, how did you
yeah,
go
yeah, yeah.
about discovering
Yeah.
that?
So that was it. So that's the other thing is you don't have to do it all on your own. You have to do a lot of it on your own
Yeah.
because especially if you're working like scrappy, if you don't have like a lot of money, it does take money. Like even if you're trying, even these last two films that I just made for like on the like just a shoestring budget, like we still spent money, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so that's one of the things I think that's also makes it hard to start. And so like so you do learn to do a lot yourself that otherwise it would be lovely to delegate out and hire out. But I found this team and they were willing to come in. And so if you can just find somebody who like compliments you and who has maybe a similar vision, who cares about the story too, that's when we started. Like I had someone who knew more about how to make a film than I did
Yeah.
on my team. And so I attached to that. And that was maybe like, May, June, July. And then, yeah, oh my gosh, it must have been because then I remember we shot this, we found our DP and we shot this footage in the summer of that year because I, again, didn't know anything about editing, but just did it anyway. I just figured out over the course of the day how to put this little teaser together from our footage that we grabbed. And then I compiled that so that we could start a fundraising campaign. So we were fundraising in October of that year, and I used Seed and Spark, which I think is a really great platform. And I think everybody gets to do one crowdfunding campaign.
In their career.
Yeah. Some people do many and
Yeah.
like are really have learned how to do it. It is a full-time job. Like, yes, you are going to then operate on the goodness of people's hearts and on these donations, but it's like you got to be in people's faces, like
Yeah.
every day, all day for a month. And you're just like hoping that your relationships stay intact and people understand. And you know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
uncomfortable. You're stepping outside of your comfort zone to do that. But I do think it's a good way to get something off the ground, for your first project. And so we used Seed and Spark, and we met our goal there. And then we just set up,
How much did you
we
try to
set our
raise
date.
from that?
I think I want to say my goal was
Okay.
$15,000, and we raised 22
Yes, look at you.
in the month of October. That was crazy. But I mean, it was a lot of hustling. But also, you now that I've made films for $2,000.
Which I
You're
wanna
talking about
talk
short
about.
films. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think it was like necessary, but it made me feel really good to be able to like pay everyone who worked for me like a decent wage. You do run into like sometimes people are willing to work for favors, but they might not be willing to do it more than once, or or you can trade or whatnot, and people jump ship boy
Yeah,
because when they understandably so, because like a paying gig comes up, and then you
correct.
like start losing your crew. So it made me feel like really really one good about paying the people who were there for their craft, and then two, it just kind of gave me that security of knowing that it wouldn't fall apart.
Yeah,
I mean, it will in some way or another, but it
yeah.
wouldn't fall apart because of that. But yeah, so that's what we did, and then even still, I hadn't finalized the script at that point. Um, so yeah, I think I was just sitting on it, going like, okay, I know this needs revisions, and then you start learning when you go into production. You can write the dream version of your script, but if it has like a cast of like 30 characters, and then like part of it takes place on the moon or like
Yeah.
whatever, then it's going to be more expensive to make. So ultimately, aside from like just streamlining and getting like right to the point of the movie, I also just needed to strip it down to 2 locations for the sake of budget. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of what that rewriting process was like. Ultimately, so I'd say I wrote the thing in May and we shot it in December. And before COVID hit, which would be March, we were pretty well
Yeah.
done with it. We did a few more things in post virtually after that. But by June of the next year, I was submitting a finished
Yeah.
film to festivals and whatnot.
And then doing
Yeah.
really well on the festival situation. Um,
Well, we got it. We got a lot of rejections too.
I mean,
But
clearly everything gets rejected at some point, but
yeah,
nobody talks about that.
no, except for
Yeah.
me.
Well, no, but I think that's a real
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I think that's a real
Yeah,
thing
for
to
sure.
acknowledge. I'm not gonna let you, like,
Yeah.
sit in that because I wanna
No.
give you the
No.
praise that you deserve. But,
Thanks.
yeah, I
Thanks.
think for all of anything that we put out, there's gonna be people that don't believe in it and then people that say, "No, thank you," and
Yeah, and for some film festivals, I mean, it's just part of the learning curve of doing this the first time. Like 15 minutes is runs a little bit long for a
Mhm.
short film, and there were a lot of programmers who got back to us that didn't program the film, that were like, we just didn't have the you know
The
what I
time.
mean, like the time to
Mhm.
fit it into a block. But we loved your film. I was like, okay, there's another little bit that I learned, like aim for 10 minutes, 12 minutes
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
short film in the future.
So,
If your goal is to play at festivals, maybe.
do you
That
feel like
doesn't
that
have to be the
is a
goal.
goal for you now?
Yeah, 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 because I think the festivals are what led me to the next things that I did. It's
Okay.
just in terms of like marketing, especially for something like a short film, which is most likely not aiming for like a distribution deal. I mean, there's platforms, there's a lot of amazing platforms now where your short film can live after you're done with a festival run. But it's not the same as like the kind of distribution you're looking for when you make a feature film. And most people, a short film is like a calling card,
Right.
because it's like, here's what I can do. And so I think just festivals gave me the opportunity to put that in front of people, to meet other filmmakers who may want to collaborate on something else moving forward. And they're just they're just a good time too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's some really great festivals out there that really celebrate their filmmakers, and make it an amazing experience for you. And I think after putting in the hard work uh, to make the film come to life, it's kind of nice to have those celebratory moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to not that I don't want to hear more about Honor, but after this whole festival situation, were you then reamped to be like, okay, this is having its moment. I need to churn out the next thing? Was it actually, I've realized that I really love the directing and producing part of this? Like, what made you then decide to continue creating and putting, therefore, more hats on as you did so?
My friend Dalia, who is one of my primary collaborators now, um, she hit me up in, I guess last year, it was 2021, about a film competition called Collaboration Filmmakers Challenge. That's it. And it's rather than like a 48-hour film festival, it's a 2-week film competition. So it's sort of like also nuts, but a little more doable, uh, to make something from start to finish in that time. And she had done it before for a couple
Do
of
you have to
years.
apply for the like that to be a slot in it, or is it like anybody can do it and
You
then
can
you
just sign up.
apply?
Yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
you can just sign up. And then there's sort of an entry fee to sign up. You can sign up as a filmmaker if you want to like create a film, or you can sign up as a key collaborator if you want to present yourself as a cinematographer or a director or whatever you do. You can also sign up in that regard and then go and just jump onto other people's films.
Interesting.
There's this big mixer at the beginning of it, and they give you this quote which has to inform your film in some way, which is, I guess, sort of how they try to keep it.
Cohesive.
And also just to keep people honoring that 2 week, because it'd be easy to just get a jump start and have a script ready to go when you
Mhm.
get there. And maybe some people do, but then once you get the quote, that might flip everything on its head. And so you have to sort of integrate that in some way. And then at this mixer, everybody meets each other and you find people who fill your crew or fill your cast,
Oh,
uh,
cool.
or whatever. So she hit me up, and at that point, Honor had its festival run, and she had also made her first short film. She has a very similar experience as me, coming to LA as an actor, and then just like making shit happen. And so her first film she'd made shortly after I'd made mine, and she hit me up and she was like, "Hey, I want to do this 2-week thing. Would you be interested?" And I was like, it was at a moment where I was like, when am I going to do the next thing? Like, it's the money thing. Like, can I ask for money again? I don't feel
Mhm.
like I can, or like whatever. And this was just a like say yes moment of just
Mhm.
like yes, and then 2 weeks later, like process it all because you don't have time to think.
Right.
So that's when we made Gen V, and uh, yeah, that one I was not in as an actor. So that was the first time that I directed, and then we co-produced. And I was like, you know what? Just for this 2-week competition, yeah, let's do this. I'll focus on this, and then
Okay.
we can write you a role, and I'll direct, and that will help us like stay streamlined and be able to get this thing done. And so yeah, that was the first time I had an experience like directing solely
Yeah.
from the other side of the camera.
Did you, and obviously clearly you liked it because now you're doing it.
Yeah, I did. And it see, that film opened up an opportunity for me to have my name thrown in the hat for a directing job for a feature film. And those are those moments where you're like, "Oh man, like
Mhm.
can I do this? Could I do this?" And then you sit down with a script and you just go, "Well, okay, what's my take? How do I envision this?" You start like, you know what I mean? And by the end of that, I went and sat down with his writer and had a pitch that I was super proud of. And you know what I mean? Like it just work begets work. And
Yeah.
I just think if you just find your team and just start. Um it doesn't have to be perfect the first thing
Right.
you make. Yes, strive for excellence, like absolutely by all means. But you're always gonna level up. You know what I mean? So just wherever you are, start there. And yeah, and then that landed me this opportunity to have like a very like serious sort of opportunity. Like I think I went all the way down to her final two pick for this, for this job. So, and that was just because I all of a sudden, like 2 years earlier, I was like, I'm not a director. And then,
Yeah.
yes, I am.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, this is not a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Of the producer, actor, director, writer hats, at the moment, which one are you favoring? Or which one are you feeling the most copacetic with at the moment?
It's a good word. I think it's still actor
Okay.
because that's just what I love.
Yeah.
But I have fallen in love with the like ownership aspect of being the creator.
Mhm.
And I don't know, there's probably several actors listening to this. It's just one of those things like you get auditions, like this is all you ever wanted to do. And then you get an audition, yay, and then you get the script and you're like,
Eh.
this is bad. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like so much stuff that you audition for is bad. And I think just like making something to your own taste that you think is good, that you think, you know what I mean? Like is a story that you think matters. Like chances are you're going to find its audience and they think it matters too. You know what I mean? And I think or even just like finding a tone, like a humor, things that you think are funny, like I just think there's so much freedom in doing that. And if you ever do want to direct and act, because the film we made after Gen V, we did that competition again this year.
Okay.
It's called Clean Slate, and I was like, you know what, this year I want to be in it. And I would do both. I would do both again. I hope that I have a career that includes both.
Mhm.
Moving forward, but I do think that you know my heart still loves to like jump inside of a
Peace.
role. And
Yeah.
yeah.
In terms of the technical part of, or like the tool aspect of like how one creates, what have you found along the way were some things that you wish you knew earlier, or like you found yourself in a position where you're like, oh, I don't know and I'm making this up, and now this next time now I have this? Were there any particular moments in any of these capacities that you kind of had that for yourself?
So many times,
Yeah.
all the time, like still I do think, well, one, I would love to start with like don't let that be the reason you don't do it and you don't start. Because I had zero ideas about how to make a film
Yeah.
when I began. And you other people, like you're gonna eventually get a crew together, and those people know what they're doing and they know what their jobs are. So eventually you're going to have to find somebody to shoot it. So you're going to have a director of photography, and that cinematographer, they have worked on their craft and they know what they're doing. So it's okay to go to not, because I was like, well, I don't know what to tell them about it. Like, I don't know how to make a shot list. Like,
Right.
is this medium, like super wide, like ultra close? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what lenses we're using.
Right.
I didn't even know what the difference between anamorphic and spheric was. And he was like, do you think we want to go like anamorphic or spheric? And I was like, what does that mean? And he's
Mhm.
like, oh, like square or rectangle.
Yeah.
Which there's so much more to it than that. But that's the way my brain understands it, right? And so, I just leaned on him. And so you can get together with somebody who knows what they're doing and be like, okay, so in this scene, here's what matters. And you can use your storytelling, the thing right? Use that and go like, this is where we need to feel like the intimacy between them.
Mhm.
This is where we need to feel more of a sterile environment. And then they know what to do. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
directing is sometimes just having people like filling a room with people who are good at what they do
Yeah.
and leaning on them. So one, don't be afraid to start. Two, yes, I now know what anamorphic means and what spheric means. Of course, there's like things like that you pick up along the way. We had a crazy experience with sound in honor, which was
Okay.
that some of it just disappeared that we had
Oh,
recorded
no.
in our first day. Yeah. Our sound recordist was working with some equipment that she'd never used before, and you know, just things like double check and make sure you got everything, because then we went the majority of the issues in our post process were trying to ADR the stuff that we had
Wow.
lost. And we had the, we got in some studios, we figured it out. And it was this sort of, we had lost this one super long, rambling monologue in which, like, half the time my head was turned away from camera. And so I had to, like, match up exactly, what,
Oh
what
gosh.
matched the lips, but then also keep going and match again when my head turned. It was just like wild.
Yeah.
It was a wild experience, and we got it. We still did it. It was just like sat there for hours, like staring at my face on the screen with these headphones like this with a mic and just trying to nail it. And we got it. And you would stare at it and you couldn't tell that
Wow.
anything was wrong with it. And still it just felt like it wasn't from that room, because it wasn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we had an amazing sound designer who's blending in the room tone and like doing everything. Like, it just still felt like it wasn't there. And so we ultimately came up with a different solution to just cut it all together and tie the scene together. In my film, it cuts back and forth between these two places, between a room she's in the present, and then her memories of like what happened that got her there. And so we just cut back to me in the room and recorded some voiceover, and then you just, because she was constantly
Mhm.
in that memory, and so it just worked for that. So I don't know, things like that, just like double check, make sure you get room tone. People always forget that.
Yep.
um, you know, that's the thing, is that it's just like when you learn this way rather than just going to school and learning from like class, it really is all just sort of symbiotic. Is that the word that I'm trying to find? What does that mean?
Symbiotic
I need
means
to.
that it like each thing relies on the other thing.
Yeah. So it just sort of like one thing flows from one thing to another, and you're just like, it sort of sinks in a different
Mhm.
way than like learning it from a textbook. You know what I mean? Not that
Yeah.
that's what film school is. Film school is very practical, but it's just I don't even think I could like name all of the things that I know now. I think if somebody pointed out to me, I'd be like, oh yeah, I totally didn't know that when I started, and now I do.
Yeah.
And there's a bazillion things I still have yet to learn.
Do you find as you've continued going through this that your confidence has changed? Or what do you feel about you as you enter into these rooms, clearly having learned on the job and learned well on the job to continue getting and developing, more projects. But how have you felt as you continue moving into this new sphere coming from where you started?
I mean, um, like, yes and no. Yes, I have. Yes, because I've done it now, and because things I've made have like received awards and accolades and things like that help, right? And you're like, oh hey, like other people think it's good too,
Mhm.
or maybe you weren't sure if it was good, but then you got something, and they're like, oh, okay, like somebody thinks it's good. And so yes, in that regard, like I'm not scared to take on a project again. I'm like, okay, I know, like we've got a crew, we've got a team, we've got people we work with now. We're going to continue to meet new people who will be incredible collaborators. I I have the confidence to do it again because I've done it before. Uh, and yet there is like never an end to that imposter syndrome, I think. Like I definitely have moments of like, I don't know. I just think anybody I've ever talked to, like you level up and
Mhm.
then you get there, and that's a level that where you were before, like you would look up to, right? You'd be like,
Mhm.
ah, someday, like look at so and so who's at this level. Like, if only I could just be there. And then you get there because you do the thing, right? And then you're going to these like film festivals or to these things, and then you see somebody who's they have like all of these feature films, and they have a star in their film, or they have this, and you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
just always, and then they start speaking to you in language that you're like,
Mhm.
like, I don't know that terminology because I didn't go to school for this or whatever. And so then you have that moment of like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't know anything. And then you constantly, it's just I think the battle
Yeah.
of anything. And just, it's so important to take care of yourself and be good to yourself.
But what do
And
you do in those moments for you? Clearly, you're
sometimes,
aware of it, you know?
yeah, oh, totally, totally. I mean, sometimes I just did have a complete meltdown,
Mhm.
and I get and I go there, and like, uh, and then on the other side of it, you wake up, you shake it off, and you have a good community, have a system of support in your life, hopefully, whether it's family, parents, chosen family, partners, your own collaborators,
Mhm.
whatnot. And then and then too, I think, after you've done that a few times, maybe like when you can feel one coming on, you can then check in with yourself and remind yourself, like, oh yeah, I felt this way before. But then I made another film and people really liked it and
Mhm.
it meant something to some people, and I'm proud of it. So, like, I think it's just, there's like that perfectionism mentality that, like, I've struggled with my whole life, which is that you're standing at letter A and all you see is letter Z,
Yeah.
and you just want to, like, be there, and you're not giving yourself the grace to, like, walk through the whole alphabet and just take the steps it takes to get there, and I think
Yeah.
that it's just, like, you know really important to remind yourself that, like, nobody was born Steven Spielberg was born Steven Spielberg, but he wasn't he didn't win an Oscar straight out of the womb, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, like,
And also
it's
just remembering that come
yeah,
letter G, if you didn't, continue on the alphabet, you wouldn't have met this current collaborator. And then you wouldn't have, like you need the other
100%.
letters to complete the full alphabet. But it
Yeah.
also reminds me, I watched that J-Lo documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Halftime. Um,
Mhm.
I appreciate J-Lo. She's not like, I'm not like J-Lo, but I was like, okay, this Netflix clearly thinks I'd enjoy this, so I should probably watch it. Thank you, algorithms. And so I
Mhm.
watched it, and I guess I didn't know the intricacies of, her experience with the movie Hustlers, and how
Mm.
she thought that this was going to be the vehicle through which she'll finally get nominated for an Oscar, but certainly win an Oscar. And, you know, it kind of relates to what you're saying, in that we forget that even people who are at the quote unquote top of the game are being rejected. I mean, it's clearly like, oh, she didn't
Oh,
get nominated for an Oscar.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
sorry, so it must be awful
Oh,
for her.
yeah.
But for her, that was like the next leveling up of her career. And she was nominated for a Golden Globe. She thought she was gonna, like, people kept talking about it, and then she didn't even get nominated for the Oscar. And this whole dream and the people propelling her around her saying, this is gonna happen for you. Of course, this is your moment. Like, and then she has the full letdown of, oh no, I'm not even given the opportunity to be nominated for it, let alone win it.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, right, just because you're playing at this level up here, it doesn't mean that you get all the things that you want either.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know?
Oh, no, totally. And you'll often meet people that are at that level too, that sometimes you they'll level with you and they'll be like, "Yeah, every day I feel like I don't know what I'm doing."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It doesn't end. And so just, like, check that and go anyway.
Yeah. We
Do it
talked about
anyway.
this on an earlier episode with Jazz Hall, and just, this idea that in some ways imposter syndrome, or the words around imposter syndrome, well, first of all, like, if we were to unpack imposter, it's like already like, or a syndrome, like just the words themselves are such a
Yeah.
wild labeling, really.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
that every single person is susceptible to feeling those things, and that in some way that
Mhm.
actually can be a unifier, really, if you recognize
Totally.
that you're walking into a room and every single person from wherever they are in their life is entering with that in some way. It's like, oh, no, 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 no. I know I feel alone right now, but truly everybody knows what this feeling is for
Yeah.
themselves. It's not a solution, but I've found it to be a little
Yeah.
bit more helpful.
Oh, 100%. And it starts to feel that way the more you get out there and just open your mouth and talk to people.
Yeah.
Um, and you will learn things that you didn't know, just by going and doing the thing. Also, you know more than you think
Yeah.
already. Like, no, I couldn't open Premiere and cut my own film, but when I sat in an editing session, I understood the beats and I understood the timing and I understood what mattered to the story, and I
Mhm.
knew how to communicate that to my editor, and that's all you have to do. to be able to finish the film. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, if you want to learn to edit so that you can make your own film on a budget, and you don't have the budget to hire an editor, or don't have a friend to call for a favor in that regard, like uh, YouTube, like you
Yeah.
can just get the software. Resolve software is free. DaVinci Resolve is free, and you can sit there with YouTube. I mean, if you're devoted to, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden you can shoot it on your iPhone. What was it? Tangerine was shot on an iPhone, I think.
I think.
There's just things like, if you want to. My friend made a web series that was shot on an iPhone. She edited it herself. Um, they did certain things to elevate the production. I mean, I think she had to. Sound is important. She had to. So that's where they put their money, was into
Mhm.
hiring a sound recordist and mixer. But like, you don't have to have like a super full crew. Like, you can make things with a smaller crew. Like, you just need a camera, you need good sound, you need good light.
Is that
And
how you did the 2001 that you were just talking about however many minutes
well,
ago?
so here's the thing with those, is that those were part of this Collaboration Filmmakers challenge. So a lot of our crew we got from the people participating in that.
Mhm.
So that was sort of a little bit different, because there's just this environment of like, yeah, you're going to come and jump on. You're not going to expect payment. We'll feed you, but and we'll credit you. But like, also, I'm going to help you with your film, and
Right.
also, you know what I mean. So that was more of that. That's like the vibe of that competition.
Mhm.
Though I think, there's certain roles we couldn't fill from that. It was easy to find maybe other actors,
Mhm.
and maybe I think we got our editor through that. But grip and gaff, all your camera crew, like those aren't usually the people who are at those events. Though we did find it amazing to see who to work for the rest of my life, and I can't wait to like have money to pay her next time. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that it does happen. So I don't know. I think we ended up paying our makeup artist, because you need to. They have a kit. They're using their materials. You need to at least cover that. Um, uh, we maybe paid a colorist for Gen V. There's certain things, you know what I mean? So it's not like we
Mhm.
we had to spend some money. We had to each year we rented one of our locations, and then we used a free location.
Yeah.
Um, you do what you can. There's like little bits, but it makes it more manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we begin to wrap up our time, um, I know I kind of asked a version of this, but is there anything just generally that you wish you knew as an artist overall when you were younger, starting out, transitioning into different parts of your career, that you feel would be a helpful share for anybody listening?
One, like, nobody's gonna do it for you. So decide what it is you want, and then map out your ABC. You know what I mean? Break it down into tangible steps. Two, because I used to think like, oh, as soon as I have an agent, like that's the
Yeah.
silver bullet, or as soon as I have, this, or if only I was this, like it's just not like, just if you have something to say, if you have a story to tell, sit down with your computer. I don't even care if you have Final Draft or whatever. There is a free software program for screenwriting called, I think it's spelled CELTX. um or if you feel like splurging for the Final Draft, that's sort of the industry standard. Even you can open up Microsoft Word, just start putting words on a paper. You can pick up a book, you can YouTube story structure, but just start writing. I think so. One, nobody's going to make it happen for you. And two, I think this is particularly for people who've had a path of maybe like formal acting conservatory style training programs. Um, you learn so much there. You learn about story, you learn how to bring it to life, you learn how to heighten stakes, you learn how to do all the things that you need to know how to do to tell a story there. And that's amazing. And yet, sometimes in those programs, there's a very like stay in your lane mentality. Because, right, if you're say you're hired for a theater production and you're an actor, there's a director, there's a stage manager, there are words that you're bound to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a job, and yes, you should be directable, you should be a good collaborator, you should, you know, but I think it's drilled so much into your mentality, and I think that was one of the biggest hurdles I had to overcome, was just I had gone through so much of that I was like, no, I'm not a writer, I'm an interpreter of someone else's words. No, I'm not a director, I am supposed to be directable, you know, and I'd sort of taken on this like role of what the actor's job is and devoted myself to it. And then when I wanted to create my own work, I had a really hard time because I had sort of like identified with this path. And so I think just anything you can do. Yes, won't it be amazing when someday you're hired on a production and all those roles are in place and you can just do your one thing? But it is also like that there's a time and a place for that, and it's an incredible thing to be a part of like a well-oiled machine like that that feels very, hopefully you feel very like valued as a collaborator in that environment, but also there's so much like reward for putting on a bunch of hats and just making something happen, you know? And I think that is something I would just advise to like, you know, check and just check in with yourself and have some awareness and like, yeah, maybe you don't want to write. Maybe you have a story to tell, maybe you have an idea, but you'd rather give it to someone else. That's okay too. But if you do, or you want to direct, you can learn anything.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to just do the one thing that you went to school for.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing so openly and going on this wild journey with me
Of course.
during our time together. If people wanted to check out the work that you have created, or they want to collaborate with you in some capacity, or they just simply want to like follow along
I
on
love it.
your journey, what are some of the ways in which people can reach out to you respectfully within your own boundaries?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram, which is just my name with an underscore in the middle. LAUREN_NOLL. Yeah, I would love to hear from folks. Just pop into my DMs if you have any questions or want to chat about something, or you're like, hey, I live in LA and I do this. Um, I I mean, yeah, I make movies and I'm never gonna stop. So I always want to find more people to collaborate with.
If you need somebody to
And
like come
yeah,
out and join you in LA who like has local housing, just give me a holler. I'll be there.
yeah, I know we should do something.
For real.
We should make something. Yeah, I would love to hear from folks.
Perfect.
And I don't think actually none of my films are available publicly online. But if there's anything I talked about that strikes anybody's interest, you can always reach out to me for a screener
We love.
privately. Yeah.
We love. Thank you so much.
Yay. Of course. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.